Okay, so today, guys, we are back with another episode of Punt or No Punt, and today I'm very, very happy to welcome Value Heavy's Peter to the channel. Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, mate. It's good to be here. Appreciate being on the show. How you
Absolutely,
doing,
man.
mate?
Yes, I'm doing very well. Peter, I've known you, well, since I've started streaming, really. You were the first person to give me a raid on Twitch, so I can't really thank you enough for that. Really got my foot in the door. But obviously, we have a lot of fun. Like, if I see you streaming 10, 16 and L, then I'll come bum hunt you, and we have a bit of fun with it. So, not always the prettiest hands, at least on my end. I know you're very, careful with that stuff, but I like to try and hunt you down a little bit. But it's really nice to have you on the show. You're going to be playing Punt or No Punt today. Are you excited?
I'm very excited to be here. Yeah, as you say, like we go back for a few months, I
Mm,
guess now.
yeah.
I think I remember somebody, I think a friend of yours, or maybe it was like what happens in Vegas or somebody
Yeah.
plugging your channel on our
Hmm.
Discord, and I
Yeah.
was like, okay, let's check this guy out. And yeah, to be honest, it doesn't surprise me how much you've grown.
I appreciate
And yeah, I'm very excited to finally be talking to the man himself,
that.
to be on the most famous show on YouTube, I
Oh, I
guess.
mean, you're very kind. If you don't know Peter, you should know him. You can check him out on YouTube and also on Twitch. I'll leave those links in the description below. Make sure you do go ahead and follow him. So, without further ado, let's crack on with the game. Here are the rules. We're playing Punt or No Punt, and Peter is the contestant today. The contestant will bring on 5 hands, and I will decide if each of them are a punt or not a punt. I'll ask Peter for his analysis throughout the hand to just see if there's any backstory to it. And at the end of each hand, we'll decide whether a punt or no punt. At the end of the 5 hands, we'll obviously have a winner. Either Peter will win and there will be in the favor of the no punts, or unfortunately, as has happened recently, you may lose and the punts will be victorious. So I just need to ask you one more thing for the integrity of the
Right.
game. Is there any chance I've seen these hands before? Because that is a stipulation in the rules.
Like as a poker player, there's always a small chance, right? But I'm gonna go with you haven't seen this before.
You sent me them
I
yesterday, and
trust you.
I opened them an hour ago, and I only to put them in my database so that I could show. So
Okay,
if you're ready and you're happy, then we're going to
I'm
begin
happy.
with the 9-7 of.
I'm ready to do this. Yeah,
We're
let's
ready with
go.
the 9-7 of hearts. Let's go. So our first hand is 9-7 of hearts, and we are on the cutoff. And Pete, this is at 5 and L, right? You play a lot of. If people don't know, Pete plays educational Microstakes stuff on stream, and he plays 100 and L off stream, usually on Unibet, and we have a special hand at the end, which is 100 and L. So first of all, we're starting with the 5 and L, and we have an open to 2.4, which is very reasonable. Pete, it's actually the sizing that I use. I'm sure you stole that off me, even though
Yeah, I probably did.
even though this is December.
Yeah.
um, and the small blind 3 bets to 11. I'm pretty much okay. So I guess you were very, very deep here. The 400,
Mm-hmm.
400. Well, the pot's going to be 400 big blinds if it all goes in. So being 220 effective, are you thinking, or 230 effective? Are you thinking that this is because I imagine you're probably going to fold this 100 deep? How does that affect your decision here, and how much wider are you going to be calling?
So it's a thing where like basically if you start becoming very deep, these kind of hands kind of start performing a bit worse at a certain point, right?
Hmm.
Because let's say we hit a flush and we get all the money in, we're probably gonna be cooler at certain points. So I do still like playing these hands deep stack. Usually because I do think a lot of people are playing these hands too passively,
Mm-hmm.
deep stack in general.
Right.
So I do think I have a lot of room and a lot of playability with these type of hands to, yeah, I would say, and let's not maybe spoil the rest of the hand. I'm not even sure, to be honest, what's gonna happen, but make some maybe more, questionable bluffs with these type of hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're always gonna have a lot of playability, some gut shots, flush draws, straight draws, and when people are a bit more passive in these deep stack pots, I think we have a profitable call here at this
Mm-hmm.
point.
Fair enough. Certainly okay. Certainly okay with it so far.
Mm-hmm.
We see King 8, King 2 diamonds, and opponent
Mm-hmm.
C bets for very small. Any notes on his sizing? Like, do you think he should be sizing up this deep, or do you think this is okay on this texture?
I think this is pretty okay sizing by
Hmm.
him. Like looking back at this, I guess we kind of have a fold at this point.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I think we just can move on, right? Obviously, we have some backdoors, but like, if we're up against, obviously the small blind range is going to be quite tight, and I imagine he may three bet a little bit less often this deep than he might do 100 deep. So he may be more condensed towards the strong, King X areas of his range. But it's a very, very good price. We do have some backdoors. I don't think we're in punt territory yet, Pete. So we'll let you get away with a call here. Not a raise though. Ace on the turn.
Calling.
Okay. Ace on the turn. I hope we're not calling anymore. And our opponent checks. Now, obviously we have 9 high, which is a problem for us. Now, it depends on Villain 2. I don't know how many stats you have on him or anything, or if you know anything about him, but do we expect him to be, I think that trapping here with ace king and obviously kings and aces would be pretty normal. Do you think there's any consideration for him to be betting those this deep, or do you think checking is just going to be what he's going to be mostly doing with all those very strong hands, which he always has, obviously, in the small blind, and we don't have probably at all?
First of all, I don't have any reads on this guy whatsoever.
Right.
I just checked my database. I have not enough hands to make any assumptions. I do feel like on these stakes, way too many people are going to be still betting with their ace kings, their aces, their kings, those hands that at a certain point don't make too much sense anymore to bet. Because I would say they play a lot better as a trap on a board like this when they just have it all locked up.
Sure.
So I do think too many people bet those hands. So when he does check, I would say a lot of these players are very capped in the range at this point.
Okay.
Right.
That's a fair assessment, I think. So you're expecting a lot of like 10s through queens, and obviously against that, we need to be we need to probably be putting some pressure on. We're never going to win by checking this back. I guess once we're here, we're sort of, once we call the flop and we see this turn and he checks, it feels really ugly to check this down and lose. So I guess we just have to bet, and we're also, I imagine, pretty much at the bottom of our range. I would like having some equity. Obviously, that would be nice.
But that would be quite nice here.
But being at the bottom of our range as well, other than I guess 6, 7, and 5, 6 of diamonds in terms of absolute hand strength, 9 high over 6 high, but they're at least going to have some equity when called, unless our opponent is checking a boat. But as you said, you do expect, and I agree with you, I expect our opponents not to be too balanced and to be mostly betting ace king aces here. Maybe at some frequency checking, but not as much as they should. So we're going to go for a bet, and we go small. So this is interesting to me because obviously I don't really expect those hands that we just talked about to fold now. So what is your plan with this sizing?
So this is the type of sizing I like to use in these spots where there are gonna be some frequencies where some players do check with hands like aces, kings, ace king, right?
Yeah.
I do think too many people are just too greedy here to not raise with those hands. So
I think that's a good point.
I don't like using the word information bet, but it kind of is a bit of an information bet where I kind of expect him, if he has a hand like ace X here, to just call at this point, or weaker to just call. And then I think we can start putting a lot of pressure on those hands by the river, where I do think, again, he's probably not going to find the correct amount of traps here to call again, because I don't think he's going to expect me to blast off a river on this board with 9-7 suited.
Yeah, right? Sure. Yeah, well. So I like this sizing in how you've described it, in that we're very, very deep. And when we are villain 2 and we have ace king and kings and aces, we're like, I really don't want to raise, but what if I call here and he checks behind with ace jack? That would be the worst thing ever, right? So they're like, I've got to get some money in now so I can be in control on the river. And I think that's a very good point. So I think that the times that they do trap those hands, they're probably going to raise this turn. So I do like your thought process there. And when we do see a call, I do like, your thought process here. I mean, look, Pete, we have 9 high, so we cannot check back. Obviously this is creative. I think that whether this goes down to punt or no punt is going to be, let's just have a look at your sizing here. So I like, I don't want to go too small here. We're basically saying we have a king, right? And we do have a bunch of kings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much you're going to have ace king here this deep. Would you ever? I mean, you might have at least some frequency that you have ace king, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's deep. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So, I don't think we would do anything differently with ace king. We maybe raise the flop, but it's up for debate.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're certainly not with. Okay, well, look, we have 9 high is my point, and I do think that we have stuff like king jack, king queen that is pretty comfortable to value bet here. So we're going to need some bluffs. We're at the bottom of our range. Unblocking diamonds is also pretty reasonable. I can't see how this can be a punt, if I'm honest, Pete.
All right.
So I always, sometimes I click the button too early, but I always give my verdict before. What this boils down to is I'm not happy about pre-flop too much. I'm not happy about the flop too much. But I think once we make those decisions, this is like I really like the small size, and I really like going for a larger river size. So what I will say is no punt. Pete, you're up 1-0.
All right.
And let's see if we can get this through.
Okay.
We do get it through.
Ooh.
And I imagine our opponent folded queens or jacks or something like that.
Probably like
maybe even like ace, maybe even like ace 10 or something. Who knows?
I'm wondering if you can fold an ace here at this river versus this sizing.
We're playing 5 and LP.
Sure,
you can definitely fold an ace here.
Right. Makes sense.
So you're up 1-0. Without further ado, let's go and grab hand number 2. So in hand number 2 with P up 1-0, we have king queen offsuit in the small blind and villain from the middle position slash hijack opens to 2 big blinds. And I think we have a 3-bet here. Pete?
Yep.
Which you do.
3-bet, I would say.
Yep, 9 or 10 seems good. And hijack defends. So obviously we're going to be like fairly tight from the small blind here, I would say. So our range is going to be pretty strong. So we definitely want to think about that when we go to the board, which is ace jack 5 with 3 hearts. And I think mostly we're going to be wanting to check or bet small here. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we generally bet small on these type of boards. It's like one of those boards where villain can already have a lot of hands that kind of are getting in a tough spot, right? Like all his suited hands, most of them miss unless he has a flush, but it's really tough to have a flush here at this point with the ace and the jack out there.
Yes,
and the king in our hands, obviously. And yeah, we're gonna have all the sets. He doesn't, so pretty good spot to bet, I would say, with the small sizing, because we can already generate so much fold equity versus range at this point.
So you said you have all the sets. I imagine you don't have 5s here, and I imagine that he does.
Well, not 5.
Yeah. And he also has
Fair
jacks.
Enough.
I think he also has jacks, would be fair to say as well.
Yep.
But I agree with everything else that you said, and I'm happy to continue with the small sizing. I think we definitely agree there with each other.
Yep.
Opponent continues, and we see the 4 of spades. And I think we are going to probably use our very good blocker to strong flushes. Obviously, we're blocking the king queens and the king 10s. So you're really looking at queen 10 and 8-9 and stuff like that, and 10-9. If he's going to have flushes, I think for sure this is one of our best candidates to continue betting. Trying to think whether I don't mind a check jam, but I probably just prefer to keep betting. We do keep betting, and we're sizing quite large here. Any thoughts on your sizing here, Pete?
I don't actually know if I like the size. Well, I guess we're just want to credibly represent the flush. Want to find the sizing where we can easily get it all in on the river, right? So I think the sizing makes quite a bit of sense. I don't know if it makes too much sense against his continuing range on the flop, though, right? As I mentioned, he should have a lot of folds, so the hands he continue with probably have a pretty easy call. But yeah, again, it's mostly about trying to think ahead, like how do you represent credibly a flush by the river. So I do think it's still quite standard here to keep betting with the sizing here with King of Hearts.
Do we want to continue betting with this sizing with our very best flushes? That's what I'm concerned about. Because if we have a flush here, then we block even more continues for our opponent. And I'm just concerned that we maybe wouldn't want to do that. We'd maybe want to go slightly smaller. So that is a concern to me. Also, another concern would be when we bet this big and our opponent continues, as you alluded to, he's just going to have like a lot of really good hands. And then, when they call this bet, the SPR is lower on the river, and their range is more condensed to strong hands. especially at 5-0, which this hand is at, I expect to not get many folds.
Yeah.
So that would be my concern.
Mm-hmm.
He calls, and we see a king. Now, obviously, we're not going to win. You know,
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to win.
We're
Like,
not gonna win,
no.
but can
But
we bluff this? Would be the question,
yeah,
right?
do
At this point.
I think our opponent's going to have like? Do you expect opponents here to raise jacks and fires on the flop?
In this population, I think it's a good question. I think, yeah, maybe 50-50, something like that, I would say, at this point.
Yeah. The problem I have here, and I'm not saying that this bluff isn't like very reasonable with the King of Hearts. The problem I've got is that I don't think we have any showdown value. I think that's probably out of the question, based on what we talked about on the turn. My problem is, do I expect we have to rely on a 5-L player? Do we have any information on him?
He seems a bit tight, from what I've seen.
We have to rely on a 5-L player to fold here with probably at least 2 pair. So what we're saying is we need our opponent to fold 2 pair or a set or a flush. The only thing we do anywhere decent job of blocking is a flush. We don't block any 2 pairs. I think every 2 pair folds the turn. So every 2 pair that includes a king would have folded the turn. So like ace king I expect to 4-bet, and then king jack is not calling the turn. So we don't block any 2 pairs. We only block flushes. How do I feel about this? Given that we have no showdown, I imagine that we're wagering all the money. That's fine.
Yeah.
Now I have to give a verdict. Now, this in theory, I would imagine is absolutely fine. It's just whether this is a 5-L punt. And I talked about this on my stream a lot. Like, is it a punt or a 10-L punt? You know, like, do we ever think that villain 9 is going to fold 2 pair or plus here? Because that's what he has. I think that's fair. You know, because the only
or maybe like a hand like pocket queens with a heart, right?
Okay, that makes sense. Queens with a heart.
We don't have to bluff against that. Right?
Queens of the heart. Queens of the heart that he didn't 4-bet though, as well, right? So
maybe this is a value shove, Nick. You know, like maybe I want him to call with pocket queens with a heart at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one, Pete. I have a big problem with this hand, in essence, because I really look. Our opponent could have an ace jack. It's just a matter of whether I expect our opponent to raise jacks and fires on the flop. If he had something that was, I actually think that this King of Hearts potentially can block some of his folds, because you know he could call the flop in turn with the King of Hearts. I don't know exactly what combo, but like, you know, King of Hearts something is a pretty good candidate to fold the river. I'm a bit concerned that our opponent gets here with very strong hands, and we're at 5-L, and we're just not gonna see folds here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, like my thought process here on the river is basically, I don't want to bluff this river too often, but the thing is, like, I kind of feel like I have to with King of Hearts at this point, right? Where again, we don't really have showdown value, and I'm probably under bluffing this heavily. That feels like the King of Hearts is like one of those only cards I would ever bluff with here on the 5-L pool. Right?
I can't give this a punt. I can't do it. I really want to, because you're going to be 2-0 now, and now we're going to be, you know, I might mark you harshly in the future with this in mind. I think this is a 5-L punt. I really, really do. Because I don't expect. I mean, look, we're relying on him to. I think Ace Jack potentially could fold, and that's why I don't think this can be a punt. It depends whether he raises Jacks, Ace Jack, and fires on the flop. I'm a bit concerned that he does. So I'm not sure. I think he's going to be quite flush heavy here when he calls twice. It's hard to say, but I can't give this a punt. I can't do it. He calls, which you love to see, and he shows up with the set of jacks.
Okay, jacks.
So so I think we got to the bottom of this one. Like I can't give it a punt because, you know, we can't win on the river. It's just I'm just very, very worried that he's not going to fold anything here. We're pretty much asking him to fold ace 5 and ace jack, I think. And I'm just not convinced that at Donati you're going to find many takers for folds on this river. Anyway, we do get it in. We do lose, but we are 2-0 up because I just couldn't do it. And we're going to move on to hand number 3. So in our third hand with Pete up 2-0. Now I put the hands in whatever order I just pick them at random. So, Pete being up 2-0 doesn't necessarily mean he's going to see this out, but you are in a very good position, Pete. And I'm sure you're feeling pretty good about yourself right now, moving into hand number 3. We're playing an anti-game at Aludra, which is 10-0. So we're moving up the stakes a little bit. Let's see how educational your content really is. So, couple of interesting things going on. We've got an open from Villain and a flat from Under the Gun opens and a flat from the cutoff, which is obviously going to be from a very generally quite bad player. We've got a lot of indications to say that obviously we're not really going to be calling from cutoff. We're never going to be playing with less than 100 big blinds, all that stuff. I don't want to ever squeeze here because Under the Gun range obviously very, very strong, and Villain 15 I don't imagine ever folding. So basically we're in a situation where if we put more money in here, we're going to be out of position with 9-7 of clubs, which would be awful. Okay. We flop an open end straight with a backdoor flush draw, and we go for a check, which I think is obviously going to be what we're doing always. And we get a lead out from Under the Gun. And we have a decision versus a small size and being in the big blind. I think that at least some frequency he's going to have pocket fours. He'll certainly have 6s and 8s. He may be mixing 4s, depends. Obviously we're expecting a lot of the 10-0 pool here, but there are some good players in there. I don't know if you know how good this guy is, but I do expect us to have a slight advantage in sets and certainly an advantage in 5-7. So I would expect a lot of checks on his board. So when he does bet, I'm surprised by the small size. So I'm anticipating our opponent being maybe slightly weaker. Would that be fair? At least
I don't think he should be doing a lot of betting.
Yeah.
He can still bet obviously over pairs. I don't mind it with the small sizing in a way. But obviously this smashes our range. Like 7-5, pocket
6,
pairs,
8.
even 8-6, 6-4 probably even. We can have. So we got all the goods here basically at this point.
Villain 13's got a problem here. So I don't mind putting some pressure on, which we do, especially against this sizing. And our opponent calls. Jack on the turn. I think we're about to be in another situation where where we are expecting our opponent to do something which he may not do very often, if you're catching my drift. But anyway, we have probably a clear bet here. We still have, our open and straight draw, and we have 9 high. We have a very strong range on this board when we check raise. So obviously still going to be betting all our 2 pairs, all our sets, stuff like that. We don't have any, anything really with a jack in it. So this jack is certainly better for Villain 13 than it is for us. He certainly will have pocket jacks. I imagine. We certainly don't. We don't have like Jack 8. We don't have Jack 6 or Jack 4 or anything like that. So this jack's not as good for us as it is for him. And it's not good for us trying to get a 10-0 player to fold. But at the moment, I'm still okay with this. This is good. And when our opponent calls, I think we're now in the situation where he is telling us what he has. And this is where I'll ask you, do you have any information on this guy?
No.
You don't?
I have no information whatsoever.
Generally speaking, am I going to try to get, I imagine we brick, okay. Obviously, you're not just going to bang off a 10 and goal in and get called by like aces and put this in here. So here's what it comes down to. Okay, so what do we like about our hand as a bluff? We have 9 high. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I think in general, this bluff is going to be just completely fine. What our problem is that our opponent called 6-8-4, check raise, and a jack turn. He's pretty much told us he has jacks plus. Yep. I think. Now, what
I fully agree.
I mean, it's hard to disagree, right? We've both played a lot of this stake. He could also have 8s, pocket jacks, maybe even pocket 6s. I don't think he should do anything differently with any of those hands. So it's not like he's doing too badly. And we need him to fold a significant portion of that range to make this shove valuable, right?
Yeah.
So I would put his range at, because there's no flush draws on the turn, so it's not like he can have like a floated ace king with a backdoor flush draw or anything like that. There's no way this guy's calling the turn with ace king. It's just not going to happen. So he has jacks, queens, kings, aces, 6s, 8s. Do you think he's got anything else in there? Maybe 10-9 of spades?
Not really. Not really. Like, yeah, maybe a hand like 10-9.
Yeah, but if you're going to give him 10-9 of spades,
sure.
then you also need to give him 10-9 of clubs, which we block. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we are in very dangerous 10-L territory here. I think
this bluff on the river is basically me saying I think I can get him to fold aces.
Yeah, and
because and just to be clear again, like I look at it in a way like I raise the flop versus him, right? On this board that should smash my range. I'll go for a big bet turn. I shove the river. Like, he can't be too happy about his aces, kings, queens at this point.
No,
right?
but I think that there are a lot of. I don't think it matters how unhappy he is. I think people just have an unhappily call. They don't unhappily fold generally, at 10. So like while this is while this has to be okay, like in theory, it just has to be fine. I know what his range looks like here. If we get called here, I know exactly like there's not going to be any other hand in it. Well, unless I'm completely off, there's not going to be any other hand in his range other than the ones I've just said. And we need to get him to fold a lot of that range. And I don't think he is. I really don't. Do you think that's fair?
I think we're going to find out, right?
Look, we're all in, which we have 9 high. Look, I understand if there's controversy here around this one. But, and a wise man once told me, don't try to get unknown players to fold strong hands. And we're clearly up against a strong hand here. The 3 changes nothing about the flop or the turn. So we still have to have, our 2 pairs or our sets here. I think that at 10-0, this is a stretch, and therefore it's a 10-0 punt. I'm going with punt, Pete, and I think this is harsh, but we nearly went the other way on the other hand, and I think that one was close. I think this is harsh, but I think we have to go with punt. How do you feel about that?
Fuck, mate. I want to go 5-0.
I'm not having that shit.
Okay. I understand, and maybe to a certain degree, level I can agree here. Sure.
At Microstakes, in general, we should attack weakness, not strength. This guy has portrayed a very strong range to us.
Oh yeah.
And we've just been like, look, fold aces, and we need him to know what his range looks like, and him to know how much of his range he should be folding for us to make this profitable. And it's just not going to happen, Pete. Sorry.
All right. Fair enough. I'll take it.
You can understand where I'm coming from, at the very least.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've seen it all. I've seen enough calls here with pocket sevens at this point.
It just didn't get scary enough for me. Is it pocket sevens?
I don't even remember. It has to be no.
It's aces. Right? Yeah. Okay, so if he calls with aces, then we're in trouble here, I think. Because funnily enough, this is probably one of the worst. Like queens and kings are like, and aces are like the hands we're trying to get to fold, right?
Yeah.
And you've said yourself, you know exactly where you are here, and you're trying to get him to fold aces. And I think that's just too optimistic with this guy.
Okay.
I'm going with punt, but I can obviously completely understand where you're coming from, and it sucks that I've had to punt this, but I just have to do it. Let's move on to hand number 4 with Pete up 2-1. Okay, so we're into hand number 4 with Pete up 2-1. Controversial decision in the last hand, but I think a fair one. I think Pete will accept it's fair enough. He's played enough of these stakes and on this site to know that it's probably fair enough. We open 9s. Let's see if we can. Obviously, if you win the next hand, Pete, you do win. So pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure you felt this much pressure in a while. I imagine. Open up the 9s.
This is even tougher than the times I played 400 and L. This is what it all comes down to.
It's pretty much your career building up to this moment. Small blind 3 bets, and we have an easy call. 4 betting any frequency or not at all?
I think we can 4-bet at a small frequency, maybe based on the opponent. Like in this hand, we have no hands on the opponent, so I think we want to be calling here majority of the time.
Seems pretty good, and obviously small blind range we expect to be generally tight. Worth noting, this is at 16-0. We played two 5-0 hands, a 10-0 hand, and now we're at 16.
Yep.
We've got a call from ourselves, and we see 5, 6, 7, 2 clubs. Our opponent C bets for a small sizing. What do you make of that?
Yeah. I don't know if I like it on this board, to
I
be
don't like
honest.
it.
Yeah.
Not a fan.
Like he makes my life pretty easy, I would say. So I'm happy he bets small,
Yeah.
obviously. But yeah, he kind of shouldn't do this.
I mean,
Obviously.
I would say that at 16-0, you have all the sets and he has none.
Yeah.
We're going to have hands as strong as jacks, some mixed in jacks at least, maybe some mixed in queens, depending on your ranges. We're not doing badly at all. We have 8-9.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have 7-6, 5-6. He can't really bet small, I don't think, here. I think we have an easy call, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And the turn's a 10 of clubs. And villain 16 bets small. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Again, with the small sizing. Obviously, he's now telling us he has, you know, I don't really think he can really have a set apart from 10s. He can definitely have 10s.
Mm-hmm.
Would he bet this sizing with 10s? I'm not sure. I think with a flush, this size is okay. He's probably going to want to do a bunch of checking as well, but considering he bet very small on the flop, you know, it's hard to read too much into what he's doing. But our decision, I think, is close. I honestly think we can probably let this go on this turn.
Oh.
Do you not think?
I thought the same thing, to be honest. I thought, hey, this is one of those hands where it's close. I can probably let it go. I can maybe call. And then what about the third option? You know,
I don't like the third option. I really don't like the third option.
What about the third option?
Right.
Nick?
So
I don't know.
I like, if you're going to continue, I prefer a call, but I think that I'm happy to fold. Do I expect our opponent to bet twice here without like something with like an overpair with I think he's going to have a lot of overpairs with the club, or even just a lot of flushes, maybe some pocket tens. He's doing fine. You know, we can't read too much into his sizing because, you know, his flop sizing has told us he probably doesn't understand that too well. So, I mean, right. So if you're going to do this, you at least want to have a club, right? Like, I think that if you have like nines with a club, this even just makes more sense because at least you block some flushes, maybe like ace 9 of clubs or 8-9 of clubs for the stones, or like jack 9 of clubs. You know, our hand just doesn't do anything, you know, and I think you're just attacking his sizing. You're probably very suspicious of his sizing. But you know,
I think his flop small sizing, turn small sizing doesn't make too much sense. I agree that he should probably bet here with flushes with this sizing, but I don't think the population does that. I think they're too greedy and just want to put in money with a strong hand at that point. We block a hand like 9-8, which he could potentially sometimes do this with the small sizing. So my thought is, okay, I have all the sets. I block straights. I don't think he has flushes. Let's get him to fold his range by the river.
Right. I have some problems with what you've just said, if you'll allow me. I think that 9-8 has to go bigger on the flop. I don't look, like I said, it's hard to read into his bet sizing, but I do think if this guy flops a straight with 9-8, he's going to bet bigger. So I'm not sure how good having pocket nines here is, especially without a club. You say you have all the sets. First of all, aren't you going to raise the flop a whole bunch versus small sizing? And second of all, are you really going to raise this turn? I don't think so.
Probably not, no.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter that you have all the sets and you block 9-8 for me, because I think this hand just plays way differently like that. So what you're basically saying is that you have a flush that's scared about not getting the rest in. But if you had a flush, I think you could just call because, you know, you're going to get to be able to shove over a bet or make a large river bet yourself. So I'm very worried about this now. Our opponent calls and we see the 6 of diamonds. Now, obviously, we don't win. And we could win, actually, like against like, who knows? He could have like something like ace king with the ace of clubs.
Yeah.
So
king jack offsuit, king queen offsuit. I don't know.
I think
maybe he's like, oh, I'm getting good odds.
Yeah. I honestly think we have like some showdown here. A little bit. I do expect our opponent to have a bunch of like, again, over pairs and stuff. What do we block? 9-8, but like I said, I don't think that even like intuitively, this guy is going to be betting small with 9-8 here. I really don't.
Yeah.
So we don't block any flushes.
Not representing 9-8 by this point anymore,
no.
Right?
Well, I guess he checks and we shove. So yeah, 9-8 is probably. I mean, look, 9-8. You're just going to raise the 9-8 on the flop, like a set. You're going to raise 9-8 and a set on the flop, but especially versus a small sizing, you're just basically saying you have a flush here. I don't think you have boats.
Oh, I'm saying I have a full house. I think at this
No, but
point, which
but how
makes
do you?
no sense.
It has
whatsoever.
no. It doesn't make any sense because you're never going to do this, especially in this pool. You're just going to raise flop with 7-6 and 7s and 6s and 5s. So you're basically saying you have a flush and you have no blocker. I hate it. I hate everything about it, Pete. It's a punt.
I'm just saying I think he can fold.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, but you can't just go all in with everything just because he can fold loads of hands, I think. Yeah, sure, he can fold. Yeah, he can fold. But like, you know, I really do feel like even just having a club would just be so much better. You know, I'm very concerned that we're just going to start doing. If we do this with this, we're just going to do it with 8s. We're just going to be like, oh, okay, you can't have anything.
Oh, I'm doing this with probably everything.
Yeah, exactly. So that could never be good. That could never be good. And I really, really don't think you rep the strong hands that you're hoping to rep here.
Mm.
So, with that in mind, Pete, this is a punt.
I think that's very fair of you.
So it's 2-2. Shall we have a look? Bill on 16.
Yeah.
We get it through.
Of course we get it.
It ain't spew
so
if it gets through. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pete, very optimistic. Congratulations for getting this one through, but not your most educational content, I would say.
All right.
We've got hand 5, which is a special 100NL hand 5 at Unibet, and it's 300. So let's go and take a look. So in our deciding hand, we're 2-2. Pete, nervous?
I'm very nervous. I'm just hoping I'm not punting here in this last one.
So we've got a special hand. He said to send it by video recording because it's on Unibet, so you can't put that in stars in Poker Tracker, I imagine. So we're going to play it. Let's have a look. Sandua opening up. Oh wow, it's so hard to read this. Opening up. No, we posted the big blind, and the button opened to €2, and the small blind called. And we elect to 3-bet with Jack 10 offsuit. Any thoughts on that? That seems like a little bit out of the ordinary already.
So I know the button a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's a regular. He's a bit passive, not that aggressive himself. And yeah, small blind is a recreational player. I would say he calls small blind. Shouldn't really do that. So
exactly,
it's basically one of those spots where the button opener is pretty wide. Obviously, he opens buttons, opens on the button, and the recreational should be pretty capped. I really like being very aggressive in these spots, especially if I expect the button to not be too aggressive, not 4-betting enough, basically at this point, where I can get away with make him fold a whole bunch of his range and then playing some heads-up pots versus the recreational, or even just getting it through pre-flop, basically.
Okay. We're okay with that then. The button calls, which was not part of the plan, and the small blind overcalls.
We're not happy.
And we see 3-3 deuce, 2 spades. Now, my concern already is that small blind is going to be sticky. He's going to have a bunch of like pairs that don't want to do any folding.
Yep.
Another huge concern of mine is that we have just no equity. We're not really... Obviously, we have all the strong overpairs, which you're going to be very happy about. You know, there aren't many sets out there. There are deuces, but 3s is blocked by the board. So we're mostly going to get continued against by, you know, middling pairs here. Which that's fair, and flush draws.
Yeah, I think it's again one of those spots where we again get to a bit of an exploitative point where I do think the button, even if the button has hands like pocket 5s, pocket 6s, he still has a recreational player left behind him. So even with those, he's already start getting in a tough spot. And I don't think he can really float here with hands like King, Queen of Hearts, right? He has to be pretty face up here at this point with still a player left behind him to act.
Is there something to say?
I do think both can have pocket pairs, but I do think we can put a lot of pressure versus those on turns and river. You're
going to have to. I mean, you block the best pocket pairs. I guess that's something you could say. Is there something to be said for the fact that the button is going to fold probably more often to your sizing because he doesn't expect you to continue when there's a weaker player in the small blind?
Yeah. I think that that's definitely also a part where one, he can't really raise too much because small blind calls anyway with his pocket fives, right?
Mhm.
So he can't go too aggressive. And also, he's not really going to expect me to be too out of line here. I would expect with Jack 10 offsuit. So
Mm.
I think this is a good spot for a C-bet looking to continue a lot of turns,
Okay.
mostly versus the recreational at this point.
So the regular calls, and we turn a 10. Now, so we expected our opponent to defend with stuff like spades, and a lot of those are going to have the 10 of spades in them, which we don't block.
Yep.
Not a lot of them, but a fair portion of them. He's going to have stuff like fives through pocket nines, which are now going to be in a tough spot. So I think against everything that does continue flop, we're doing just fine. We do block pocket jacks, which I think is very, very good.
Yep.
Although I expect him to do some four betting, I don't expect him to do it all the time. And we block pocket tens, which is fantastic because that is another hand which I expect our opponent to have a lot. Now, I just think we have a check on the turn because our hand is now good enough to get to showdown. We don't want to just be piling money in with Jack 10 here, I don't think. So I'd like to see a check.
Yep. I agree.
You do check and he bets. And I think we just have an easy call.
Yep, for sure.
Yep, nothing to say about that. The turn is, the river is the 7 of diamonds. We check and our opponent goes all in.
Yep.
So he's now telling us that he has. So his sizing on the turn was. I don't really want to go back because I might ruin something.
Yeah, 1/3 basically.
1/3. So he could be blocking the turn with sevens, maybe.
Yeah.
So he can have a boat now. I think he could also have deuces, potentially, but would you not want to bet bigger? I'm not sure. Do we expect our opponent to shove the river with stuff like ace 10 of spades? I think it's probably worth a shove against your line. What do you think? So
I think that's fair. Now, given that I know this guy can be a bit passive,
you don't. Really
it goes both ways, right? I don't think he's gonna really shove ace 10 suited. So I don't think his value range is gonna be that wide. It's also a spot where I don't think his bluffing range is that wide.
Right.
So I think this is a pretty tough spot in regards that, yeah, he can have pocket 7, sure. That's only 3 combinations. If he bets that turn, right? Yeah, kind of makes sense, but it's not a lot of combinations. And yeah, pocket deuces, sure, he can sometimes have if he bets the sizing on the turn. So I would say it's one of those spots where he can have full houses, but when there's only 6 combinations, he could potentially be out of line after we check turn, I would say.
Out of line.
I think
with
it's just
what?
a close spot.
Yeah, out of line with what though? Because on the turn, if he had spades, do you expect him to go? I think I'd expect him to go a bit bigger to generate some more folds. I also don't expect him to bluff the river with spades because they become pretty bad cards to bluff with. Because we're gonna have some spades at some frequency for sure. So, I do expect him to have like tens and sevens for sure, but we do block pocket tens, which is obviously fantastic. Having a jack, I think, is better than having like ace 10 because I do think that jacks is certainly worth a shove here. So I have a problem in the fact that I don't know what our opponent's bluffing with here because when he blocks the turn, he's gonna have stuff like eights and nines. He's never ever ever gonna bet those on the river. So now he's basically saying he blocked the turn with sevens or he turned a boat. Given that our hand has a lot of good properties against that range, that tight, narrow range of value hands, like even queens, I expect to just probably pure full bet pre-flop. Jacks is like the bottom of the top of the calling range of all the strong hands. So having Jack 10 just feels pretty damn good. I would say. Obviously, if our opponent wanted to bluff, it's hard for him to really have like too many things going on. If he checked back all of his spades, I would wonder what he would be bluffing with. So it's hard to say, to be honest, because he called flop and then bet the turn. So, he can't just have nothing, right? I think our hand is too good to fold as a call, just because I expect his value range to be so tight and we block jacks and tens, which is like half of the hands I expect him to have here. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. So I fully agree there. I think this is just one of the best hands we can have basically
Yeah.
at this point to hero call.
Yeah.
It's not unthinkable. He bluffs here with some spades, or yeah, maybe floated the flop with a hand, yeah, like king queen hearts, even though we don't expect it too much, and maybe thinks, well,
Yeah. King queen of
yeah,
hearts.
I only have king high. I can get him to fold ace high.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not unthinkable. He has those type of hands. So I think we need to call this off
Yeah.
here. At this
I think we need to call as well. And this is okay. We haven't seen the result yet, Pete. But you may be absolutely overwhelmed with joy to know that you are going to win 3-2 today.
Nice.
No punt for this one. I think our hand has too many good properties. Bet versus our opponent's
Nice.
range.
I'll fucking take it.
We go for the call because our opponent doesn't even have. Yeah, so like we're pretty much expecting him to have that, right? If he can ever be bluffing, I think Jack 10 is too good.
Yeah.
But obviously we talked about him having sevens, and
I think that's fair.
I think he's just going to be snap checking back eights and nines, obviously, and then hopefully finding some floats on the flop, like you said, with maybe king queen of hearts.
Yeah.
If he never bluffs, we're obviously getting ruined here, but that's not too much of a concern to me here. I think our hand is just
also,
too good.
Pre-flop and flop, no punt, right?
Pre-flop, probably. I don't love them. Right, I don't love them, but I respect your reasoning. But if I'm going to give if this was going to be a punt, it would have to be, like you said, a pre-flop or flop punt. Flop, I think you're basically playing a level game against the button here, because you expect him to never to bet this sizing with like this hand because of the small blind being in there, which I think is fair. That is where the grey area is here for sure. But once we get to the river as played, no punt. We're going to go for it. We're going to go and wrap up the session here now with a conclusion, guys. So that concludes a very, very interesting episode of Punt or No Punt with Value Heavy's very own Peter. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, man. I'm really glad that you won. I really wanted you to win. Not that it influenced my decisions at all. I think, in fact, I was probably a little bit harsh, especially on the 9-7. But I think we both agree where I was coming from, although we could obviously understand in theory where you're coming from. A really interesting hand at 100 NL to end off, where we ran into what we expected to run into if we were going to lose here. How do you feel it went for you today in general?
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm happy that I didn't punt up 5 times.
Yeah.
I think that was my main goal coming into this.
Way too good for that.
And it was just really fun to work here together with you on this video. So thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate that. And thank you very much for coming on. Again, guys, please do check out Pete on both Twitch and YouTube. He does a lot of really good stuff. Play and Explains. Very, very, very good player. Can't recommend it enough. So that's going to do it, guys. For now, take care, stay safe, and I will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.